Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, Josh.
Hey, Jack.
Welcome to Pipcast. Today we're talking about multi-disc practice, and we're kind of just going to get started with, I guess, some of the, what does it mean in terms of to offer multi-disc practice? So who wants to kick it off?
Oh, I guess I'm happy to kind of jump in. I think we talk about multi-disc collaboration a lot with our clients, collaborating with the care team, particularly because we're an OT-only clinic. It's really important for us to reach out to the other providers to, I think some of the reasons we do it are to get a really holistic picture of what the child's working on and working towards, and making sure that we're aligning our approaches with other clinicians' approaches, but also to collaborate on when our scopes overlap, but also when our scopes are really not overlapping and we're thinking, a family's asking me for this, but this feels like a your domain thing. So there are a lot of reasons why we would collaborate with the care team, but it's really helpful to consider all the different reasons why.
Absolutely. I also find like there's so much of our role that is like information gathering, and the more information I can get from other members of their care team, it's only going to help I always used to saying like throw a dart at the dartboard, and with the more information from everyone in the care team, throwing a really effective dart. So if I know what, say we've got psych, speech, and us as the OT as part of the care team, if I know what everyone's thinking about and looking at through their different lenses, and then we say have a care team meeting, we can come up with a really solid plan and I guess identify what roles each professional has within the care team, and developing a really cool care plan for the child.
What happens when, I guess, true collaboration is missing? Have you had any really, I guess where you're trying to really, it is a complex client with multiple people involved and it's just not going well? What does that look like?
I've had it occur, and like whether we speak through this through different examples that we've had, but the one that jumps out to my mind is that I might be talking through a certain concept and in my session, and the psych might be doing something similar, and we're kind of work on the same topic, but us from an OT lens is quite functional, there from a psych lens. But the kids come into session going, I just spoke about this in my psych session yesterday. Like, cool. Yeah, okay, we need to catch up and talk about how we're both addressing it, because if I'm looking at things from my OT functional lens, but that's also overlapping with a little bit of the psych lens, I can see how that's really frustrating for the client if they're, doing 2-3 sessions through the week, and talking about the same thing, having the same conversation.
Yeah,
I can see it frustrating, yeah.
that's exactly what popped into my mind, is that like when you're not aware that the child is working on same or similar goals across different disciplines, that can be really hard, because then the parents are getting mixed messaging, like the child's getting mixed messaging. You might teach the same idea two really different ways, and then the kid's like, what? I don't understand. I can't keep up. And then it's really hard to kind of monitor what progress they've made, why they've made that progress, and whether your therapy is actually being effective as well. So that's probably, I would agree, one of the biggest things that happens when you're missing collaboration. Another point that kind of comes to mind is when, for example, if a physio said, oh, that's handwriting, handwriting is done by the OT, but you haven't had a conversation with the family about handwriting. And so if you're not collaborating with the care team about what they're noticing and recommending that each of you look at doing, there can be holes in the therapy
For sure.
provision.
For sure. And yeah, that does happen. And I don't think it's necessarily the fault of anyone in the care team.
No.
It's just whether it's calendar management, whether it's finding the time, whether it's funding, so many different factors that can occur. It's but yeah, Georgia definitely highlights the importance of rock solid collaboration between the team.
I think that one thing to note is also how important it is where we can to upskill the family to really be the, I guess, central person when it comes to managing their care team as well, because so much of that collaboration comes through trust and being able to assertively say that, because it can be really tricky for families who are sitting there thinking, oh, I think they're covering this in psychology, and not having the confidence to say, actually, I understand what you're working on. I understand what you're working on. And I feel like there's some overlap here, and really bringing it back to the goals. And I know we bang on about goals a lot here, but it really is the cornerstone of everything. It has to be functional, and that's such an OT thing. But I think everyone wants to obviously make functional gains for kids. So when there is a lot of overlap, that can be tricky. But if we all come back and zoom out and say, okay, well, what does the child actually want to do or need to do in this scenario, and how can we all work together towards that, and who's the best person to be working on different things?
Yep.
I think that is really important to heavily involve the family, and we really focus on a lot of parent coaching here. So building the confidence and competence of the family is really key in that scenario.
You mentioned there, Jack, like knowing whose job is what as part of that goal. And that can be a really tricky thing. Say that, it might be an emotional red kind of goal, and you've got psych in the room as well, where they're saying things which are really important, really, really valid. And then trying to kind of say our OT piece and how do we keep this functional, where what the site might be doing also is really, really functional. So I think a little tip for everyone is being really informed and really aware of what goals and how you achieve those goals as part of your therapy as an OT when you are collaborating in a care team meeting is really, really important.
Yeah, I find it super important to be really clear of your action plan and your intentions before you step into that conversation, because it can be really overwhelming when everyone's kind of spitting out all their ideas and all their plans, and you're like, oh, that's a really good idea. Oh, that's a really good idea. It's like, no, so were mine. Mine were a good idea too. But we all need to make sure that they fit together in the whole puzzle of the kid.
In private practice, I think another challenge is the funding element and being able to actually put forward why collaboration is important, but also a good use of money, because it can be really expensive to have all the professionals all in the room at one time, and how that, I always use the analogy, I didn't come up with it, I can't remember who did, but sharpening the axe to chop down the tree, in that injecting that time early on is super important, because it will make everything go quicker and faster and more efficient and more effectively later. But when families are still learning about the journey and how to manage their funds, especially with all, some of the funding changes and things like that, it can be really hard to advocate for that early on. And I wonder if that's also why some families, we've had the odd occasion where families haven't even wanted us to know who is in the care team, or they're very protective of keeping different providers in separate to each other, and they almost
therefore
don't.
fund separate, right?
Yeah. So why do you think that sometimes happens?
I think for me, there has to be a big element of that education piece and setting it up, whether it's the role of any professional in an intake session and being able to talk through the importance of collaboration. There's a whole lot of evidence around why collaboration is really effective, and again, the importance of it. So it's the only thing I can think of in terms of being able to set them up for success to achieve this outcome.
I've heard families say that they want more of a objective opinion, so they haven't wanted us to even talk to the teacher who can be a key member of that care team, because they want us to sort of not be swayed by that opinion. And that requires a lot of education early on too, I think, because it's not always just observing the child. It's not like some, objective assessment. We're trained as OTs to really look at the whole person, and that requires a lot of information from a lot of different people. And I think reassuring the family in that scenario and explaining that we're also trained to, pick apart the stuff that maybe isn't relevant versus is. And I think that, a good therapist is able to do that, but supporting the family through that, I think, is really important as well.
Yeah, the only other element I can consider would be sometimes parents can be a bit scared of what you're going to say about their kid, particularly if their kid's having a really hard time. I feel like I've seen this in times where maybe one professional is recommending exploring diagnosis, and the family maybe haven't come to acceptance of that yet, or they're not, maybe their personal values are not super open to that yet. There can be a lot of fear around, you guys are just ganging up on us to tell us these things, and that comes down a lot to what Josh was saying, education, but also making sure you've got a really good trusting relationship with your care providers and all of your care providers in your team.
Yeah.
If you've got one that you're like, oh, they're good in session, but I don't like that clinic's practice values or things like that, I think trust really can impact that quite a fair bit.
And it is our job to recognise where families are in their stages of change too,
Big
and
time.
meet them where they're at and support them there and not make them feel steamrolled. And I think a lot of kids in that, especially in that diagnostic phase, sometimes when they're starting school, I've had a few families that we just want to see how they go. We don't want the teacher to sort of pigeonhole them or box them in if they're aware
Label
of
them.
this or label them. So we can totally understand that fear as well. So being able to unpack that and slowly support them through it and help them to understand why it is important that everyone has the child's best interests at heart, and that we can really support them best when everyone is in the loop. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are some common barriers we've seen when it comes to collaborating within care team meetings? I know for me, time is honestly
Yeah, logistics, yeah.
yeah, the logistics are really hard. And as a practice that just does OT, that comes with huge, massive benefits, we think as well. But one of the big cons is that we don't always have access to other people's calendars. It makes it really hard. A lot of backwards and forwards to get two people in the same room that run on very different calendars.
I'm forever emailing other clinicians to try and organise a meeting, and I got a response the other day, which I really respected from a psych in particular. She was like, "I've got a full caseload. The only times would be like during my lunch break, or if we cancel the client session so that we can meet." But then they added on a little bit to the lunch break comment of like, if I keep offering this to other people and other providers, that like I'm going to experience burnout and I've got a lot on my plate right now. I really, really respected their ability to like articulate that to me through the email. And then we're able to come up with a plan to be able to meet. But I think, yeah, one, being able to advocate for that, not chewing into your lunch break, because, you know, OT self-care, allied health professional self-care is very, very important. We know that. We've spoken about that on a PIPcast episode. But yeah, as you guys said, it's the calendar management of operating
it's
on
a barrier
different...
for sure. And having time in our calendar, like protected time for these things, can be hard, because we know like we have an administration day, but that's one day. If someone else's administration day is a different day, finding time to collaborate is really challenging. So that's a huge barrier, I think, to multi-disc practice in general. And I think being able to carve out the time for that and figuring out a way to carve out the time is really important. And I think it requires a lot of flexible thinking and a lot of admin support often.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think it's also it's interesting to consider if you've been working with the family for quite a long time and the other clinician has only just come on board, or vice versa. People's familiarity with the client can impact how ready they are to meet with you. They might want to say, like, let me get in, let me get to know them, let me build some rapport before we have this meeting. And I've definitely had conversations where I was working on, for example, feeding with a kid, and we were doing feeding together, but I knew on the sidelines mum was trying to get into a feeding clinic. And I'm like, okay, so it's going to be really important once that handover happens that we explore whether we're going to do two things at once or whether we have overlap and all those sorts of things. But then this clinician is like, I have like a three appointment intake process for this clinic, and or like finding the time within making it actually be worth both of our time as well. If one of us comes in as the expert and one of us is like, I don't actually know the client yet, is that the best use of both of our time? Maybe not. Maybe it is. It depends.
I also think there's it's good to think flexibly about how we can collaborate too.
Yes.
And I think that I really respect when clinicians do share their notes and keep me in the loop. And I think in this climate as well, it's really important that we're not letting go of our standards and our values, and really figuring out with families and sitting down with them what our professional opinion is in terms of how we are going to meet goals with the funding that they have been allocated, or with their private funds that they're putting towards therapy. And I think part of that is understanding that why it is so important that other practitioners are in the loop with what's going on. So that might mean a little bit of time. That might mean that I need to write a really brief letter to the pediatrician, letting them know what's going on. It might mean that I need to make a phone call to the teacher. It might mean that I need to do a note summary and send that to the other allied health care team members that are there. So there's lots and lots of different ways that we do it, but it really is crucial that we make the effort, particularly if you're in a practice that is a sole discipline practice. But from what I understand, it's, even multi-dis practices have the same logistical difficulties. They all have practitioners have their individual timetables.
Absolutely.
And a lot of families, I guess that's choice and control. There's different scopes we're dealing with. Not everybody does everything. So sometimes even if there is multiple practitioners of different disciplines in a practice, the scope might mean that they're not the right practice for that child. So, for example, we've got kids that come to us and they're seeing a particular speechy because they do a lot of AAC, and then they're seeing a different speechy because they have a real literacy focus. And then we've got other speechies that their thing is stuttering. So all the disciplines have different things, and I think it's really important that we realise that, not everyone is a jack of all trades. We're not all generalists. It's okay for us to carve out a scope and know our limitations and refer on when we need to.
Yeah, completely.
I think to expand on that, like say we do get the care team meeting and like we've come with our points, with our goals, how we're addressing XYZ concerns, but having like action points which are key takeaways from that meeting. So everyone's got a clear direction, and like considering funds and use of funds, that we don't have to continue to meet every month or so, but it's a really clear direction in how we're going about our therapy. And Jack, I like what you said before about sharing notes, and with clear action plans and a clear, therapy plan that each clinician's taking away from that care team meeting, we can then, just provide a quick check-in on what our action plan or action point was.
Yeah.
I found that's a really, really helpful thing that I've recently switched to, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then just providing like a 1 or 2 sentence update.
And when will we meet again?
Yeah, for sure.
Is this a quite a time sensitive case where we need to reconvene sooner than later to really keep checking in and support the family? Or are we going to be right as rain, let's call them the next time it's tricky? Or are we going to say, let's review in 6 months because there's like a timely requirement to kind of check back in? And having it penciled in, maybe in the month of August, I need to meet with 3 kids care teams, is so much more helpful for my planning and organisation compared to being like, oh, you need that meeting right now next week? That's good. I don't have any time next week.
Yeah.
So I think those things can be really supportive for your personal organisational skills as well. One thing I really liked that you mentioned, Jack, is how the way that we collaborate can look so different. It doesn't always have to be a face-to-face meeting, although as therapists, we love to chat and we love to face-to-face. And I have found in particular with paediatricians, it is so hard to get their time because the way they schedule their time compared to clinicians like speechies and psychs is they're booked up so much differently to us.
Yeah,
and they have
true.
such smaller time windows, and they see kids so much less frequently, that I have had so many families really value a letter from OT or from like summarising what we've been working on, what we're working towards, what I'm observing. And from families, the communication is that really supports their advocacy in those appointments as well. And thinking about it from that lens, that we might be supporting a family to advocate something they've disclosed to us that they're wanting to communicate to the rest of the team that they don't feel fully equipped to. So that's like another angle, I guess, to think about.
Can we talk a little bit about how much healthy task-based conflict is important in that care team space as well? Because I think when everyone is doing different things and we all bring different things to the table, and no child is ever straightforward in terms of therapy, and things are constantly changing and we should be able to change with it. But with that, there's always going to be differing opinions.
Yeah,
so,
and that's okay that there's differing opinions.
Yeah, I mean, we love a bit of task-based conflict here. It's like, maybe it's an OT thing we like to debate or something. I don't know. But I think not yeah, what are some tips, I guess, when there are differing opinions within care team meetings or even via email? And we know how hard email can be to read tone. And sometimes we get these emails and we're like, whoa.
They hate me.
yeah.
What? What do you mean?
So how do we navigate that when there are differing opinions?
I guess what would be really important to do is to center the child in the conversation and center the function in the conversation. It's not you're doing this, I'm doing that. It's your ideas are looking like a plan that looks like this. My ideas are a plan that looks like that. Where do they intersect and where do they conflict? And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to approach the family and ask them how they'd like to proceed? What's working for their kid? Are we going to try both and see what suits? Are we going to say, let's give your idea a try, or you know what I mean? It's laying it out really clearly, but to make it be a task-based conflict and not a personal conflict, it needs to be, what is the action? What is the plan? What are the ideas? And we're discussing or maybe debating those things, not your practice as a person.
I think like approaching these meetings where there may be some task-based conflict with a whole lot of curiosity, like asking questions about how they've got to this point. Because what I found so often, there's like intersecting ideas and like information gathering points and problem solving considerations and clinical reasoning that I've had that are similar to someone else's, and we've just kind of taken it down a different road. So to be able to approach it with curiosity, to be able to ask questions like, oh, how did you get there? Like, what things did you find to get there? And have that as an open dialogue have really helped work through and nut out a really clear plan and an intervention plan.
I think it's good to go into those meetings with your own attitude that you are ready to rethink your own opinions. I think that's really healthy to go into that meeting really open-minded and be like, I'm ready to be challenged because this is about the kid, this isn't about me. And being able to change our opinion is always a good thing. So sometimes it is modeling that, and by being vulnerable and almost showing that we are just human and we're there to challenge our own ideas, other people are potentially more inclined to do that as well. So I really like that point about curiosity and asking questions and learning other people's opinions, because we might learn something in that moment as well. But also, yeah, I think other people are more inclined to do the same through if they feel heard, and coming and centering the child and being able to, okay, we're centering the child, we're all here to learn, we're all here to rethink our ideas and hopefully land on the same page at the end of it.
Yeah, and that comes from like being really clear and really kind, and being maybe calling it out, saying like, I think that we've got some really differing opinions here, putting a name to it so that people don't have to be like, oh, I'm sitting here and I don't like what she's saying, but I'm not going to say anything about it.
And
calling it out, giving it a name and giving it an opportunity to be worked through. Cool.
Yeah, and people that work in allied health or with people aren't people pleasers at all, are we? Like,
no way.
So we're sitting there, we're like, oh, we really want the care team to like us because they have to work with us. And ultimately we know that, you know, if there is that connection and that understanding and that mutual respect, we're going to get more out of everything as well. But at the same time, we don't just want to lower our own standards or let go of our opinion and not communicate assertively in favor of that. So it's really a learnt skill. And I think it's very important that everyone goes into meetings with a self-growth attitude, I think.
Totally.
Something that's just popped into my mind when thinking about like task conflict. There's always that point in the very start of the meeting where it's like, who's going to chair this meeting, who's going to run the conversation, and who's facilitating that conversation. And largely, it always, in my experience, it falls to the person that's organised it. But
it's so true.
And I think that's appropriate a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. But also being able to go and like upskill yourself and take it as an opportunity of like, no, I've got the ideas. I'm going to try and test myself out here. I'm going to try and facilitate this meeting. I'm going to chair this meeting. Is also it's a fun thing to do. And initially it's terrifying and scary when you're asking other people to share their thoughts and kind of running the meeting, if you like. But it's a really, and the thing that helped me get to this point was Jack saying it's a learnt skill. There's so many different learnt skills throughout these care team meetings and through collaboration. And, we've spoken about email, we've spoken about letters, we've spoken about the meetings themselves. But again, all coming back to upskilling ourselves as clinicians. And there's so many opportunities through this collaboration.
And making sure we're not turning into an echo chamber, like keeping it action focused.
Big time.
So moving out, sometimes there is that, that update component of the meeting, and then, you may agree, you may disagree, but keeping it action focused. What are we actually hoping to leave this meeting with? And that's something I've always done in therapy, but I think in this scenario too, it can be really helpful to jot down the objectives or the outcomes that you are hoping to leave the meeting with, because it anchors you. We do this with the podcast, don't we?
Yeah.
It's like you want a title, or, what is the purpose of this meeting? Because it's not all just here to share ideas. There is an outcome that we're hoping to achieve. And can we spend the last 5 minutes of the meeting revisiting that, nutting it out, giving everyone tasks, and making sure that we've got some actionables from it?
Yeah, I like it.
So I guess another aspect that we need to think about is there times where you don't collaborate? I guess sometimes, obviously, if there is no other care team members, so we don't need to refer on because it's just kind of covered within our scope. But are there times where we know there's other care team members and collaboration isn't required?
Yeah, I think when I'm really clear on what my scope is and what the goals are, so for example, a handwriting goal, I may not have a whole lot of collaboration with the other care team, because what I know of the other professional scope versus my scope, I feel like I'm the expert in that. So I don't think I would really ask too many questions around and like involve collaboration too much in those kinds of therapy plans.
We also involve the family a lot. So we sort of
Yeah.
put them in the driver's seat to, even with handwriting, communicate that to teachers and what needs to sort of happen, and encourage them to initiate. If they think we need to go into the school or collaborate, we sort of are led by them and based
letting
on
the
what they
family
can
let
do.
us know.
So I agree with that.
Yeah, I think, being led by the goals that you're working on with your child is really the biggest thing. I think it's almost always going to be erring on the side of collaboration is good. And so it's rare I think I'd say it'd be rare for me to say it's not going to be somewhat beneficial. But thinking about, the types of goals that they might be working on with their other providers, are they working on quite an acute short-term goal, and I'm working on like a longer-term big picture goal, and it doesn't appear to be that they're going to have a long-term relationship with this client. That can be one factor. I'm sure we discussed like funding can be another factor too, for sure. And if the families kind of express that it is, they're not going to be able to afford to provide, like for us to provide that service, being really open with them about what other options or how we can get around without having like collaborative meetings and things as well.
We're obviously obsessed with OT. So we
Naturally.
love that OT is what we live and breathe, and we see ourselves as really, I guess, very targeted in the type of therapy we provide. Another limitation that I guess we experience, especially in the early intervention space, is under, I guess, the key worker model. That's quite challenging for practices that do only offer one discipline. Do you have any insights on that?
I guess it's hard if our client is accessing key working somewhere else and is accessing OT here. That I have like one or two clients that does that, because it can be hard to even know who to collaborate with about what in that realm sometimes. But I think I don't know, it can be hard to,
It's one of the
again, schedule
downfalls,
it
if I
in.
can be
Yeah.
opinionated on the key worker model, is that often the whole point of the key worker is that they have one central point of contact that can coordinate the team, and that person collaborates with, say they are an OT, they collaborate with the speechy if it's required, or they collaborate with the psychologist, and they sort of implement those supports in more of a holistic early intervention approach with the client. And often families, if that's not done well, or the practitioner doesn't have those collaborative skills down pat, or they don't have the discipline that they, the person that it's within their scope, I think that can get really challenging, and the families often outsource other therapists anyway, and then the whole sort of model kind of
Yeah,
falls
falls
apart.
down,
So
yeah.
so I think that is a major challenge in that if you're in a key worker role, you have to be really good at this. And that can be very hard for early career OTs and inexperienced OTs or any discipline who is in that key worker role, I think. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you cover that really, really well.
Yeah, it's a really challenging space. I think even visiting families in the home and those kinds of things, that being able to communicate what you've been privy to. Sometimes as OTs, we're the only ones that have seen the kids in the school. So the psych really benefits from knowing what that presentation was. We have a lot of pediatricians we work quite closely with, and they often say that you're our eyes in their natural environments. So I think that that's a really important, we don't take that lightly either, because we know that kids can perform very differently in very different environments. So approaching that holistically is very important as well.
I think even the inverse of that, when I've had kids who maybe their psych attend sessions at school and I see them in the clinic, the psych has an opportunity to speak to the teacher every fortnight. And so when I've had a meeting with the psychologist about a student and I was expressing things that I was hearing about from mum and dad and I wasn't quite sure what's going on, I, one, got a lot of clarity from them from their observations, so that was really beneficial. But two, I had an opportunity to almost support them to speak to the teacher in a way that would support mum and dad too, when I couldn't get a hold of the teacher and I couldn't line up a meeting with the teacher myself, knowing that we were both on the same page about what we were trying to communicate to the teacher about this child was super helpful for me, and having had that conversation, knowing we were both really clear, was really helpful too.
One of the key things that we've all been talking about through the episode today is like these actionable points and clear goals and clear objectives, no matter what the collaboration looks like, is just so essential to effective collaboration.
We bang on about it all the time, but family-centered practice is taking an individual approach.
Yeah.
It means looking at the family, what do they need? Sometimes that's one therapist, key worker in the home. Sometimes that's one therapist that is discipline specific, that has a very niche, extensive experience in a particular area. Maybe that's equipment, maybe that's mental health, maybe that's AAC.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really looking at the family and saying, do they need one therapist? Would they benefit from a key worker? Would they benefit from therapy in the home or the clinic? And I think if we really focus and put the child and the family as center and let go of our egos and let go of what we think, it's so much easier to refer on and find the right care team. And then, like Josh said, the key takeaways in terms of making that work is listen to the family, build their confidence and competence to actually be able to advocate and understand how to be central to their child's care team, and then find ways to do it effectively. And that can be written, that can be a phone call, that can be regular meetings. I think that's probably, I guess, the summary of what I've sort of taken from today. Is there anything else, G, that you think?
Yeah, I guess we talked about how hard it can be to line up, but it's hard for all of us. And I think approaching care team meetings with a real openness and a real flexibility without sacrificing your lunch breaks is probably a really important thing for therapists to, I hope people have gotten out of this episode the value of care team meetings and the value of putting them pretty high on the priority list.
And take good minutes.
Yeah, that too.
Take good minutes. Well, we hope this was helpful for people, and we hope everyone is finding a way to collaborate in a way that suits the families that they're working with. And for those other providers out there that we get to collaborate with, we love it. So keep it coming. And thanks, Josh and G, for joining us on this ep.
Thank
Jack.
you.
Bye.